Good morning to all. Welcome to 46th online lecture of the course Computational Fluid Dynamics. Today we will start our discussion on very important topic, and that is related to the discretization in unstructured grids. Okay, so we are having like different types of grids, and majority of the mathematical formulations, whatever we discussed for discretization, we discussed on the structured Cartesian grid. Okay, we will be finding that there are certain specific structured arrangement which are made to facilitate have good grid creation in some structural manner and by meeting the complex geometry curvatures also, but still for the very complex geometry and due to some constraints which are there with structured meshes, majority of the complex problems, actually one has to go with the unstructured grids. Okay, because unstructured grids provide flexibility to have very complex shapes. Okay, so due to this reason, if you find in commercial and CFD packages, it is the unstructured grid which is actually the most dominant one. For very simplified problems, people are using structured grids. Otherwise, for majority of the practical and industrial problems, actually one has to go for unstructured grid, considering the complexity of the simulation domain. Okay, so due to this reason, unstructured grids has been very popular. Okay, so let us try to see that what changes will be happening in our discretization scheme, how mathematical formulation will be different for the unstructured grids. Okay, so that is something very important one should know. Okay, so in this particular lecture, first we will try to see what are the different types of grids we are having, and then we will start with specific discussion on discretization of unstructured grids. Okay, so let me first show you one typical arrangement. So what we want to do over here, in this first problem, I want to consider a situation. My physical domain is something like this. Say this is my some channel, and in this channel I have placed some half cylinder. So this cylinder is solid and I want to study flow over a cylinder. Okay, so now if you see, this particular boundary of this cylinder is actually curved. So if I have to make structured Cartesian grid, so what I have mentioned over here, I want to prepare structured Cartesian grid for flow over a half cylinder. So if my grid has to be Cartesian, it means the grid lines has to be parallel to X and Y in Cartesian coordinate system. Okay, and it has to follow some specific structure because we are talking about structured grid over here. Okay, so can you imagine how to resolve this curved boundary using the structured grid? So that one typical representation is shown over here. You can see this is our actual curved boundary, but this curved boundary, because we are having restriction that we have to go with structured Cartesian grid only, and in order to facilitate Cartesian grids, our grid lines has to be parallel to X and Y direction. Okay, so because of this, what we will be doing, we will be approximating this boundary with the help of some vertical and horizontal line. So you can see these are some stepped vertical and horizontal lines, and these stepped vertical and horizontal lines are nothing but approximating our this grid structure over here. Okay, so this is one important point, that instead of having the proper curvature as it is there in the physical domain, we are having some stepped surface in our simulation domain. Okay, and this particular stepped surface we will be assigning some wall boundary condition. Okay, so what are the disadvantage of this? The disadvantage of this is flow near these solid surfaces will not be accurately estimated, because this curve we are considering as nothing but stepped surface. Okay, another disadvantage is that in order to
Sir,
facilitate, yeah, please.
sir, your writing page is not showing on the screen.
Oh, writing page is not visible. Let me stop and then present again. Is it visible now?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir. Now it is.
Okay. Okay. So what I am trying to say, you can see over here these steps we are having. So now what are the limitations of this grid? The limitations of this grid is one is it is not accurately able to capture the flow near the solid boundary, and in order to make it structured mesh, we are having some extra meshes over here. You can see these are the extra meshes which will be taking some storage space in the computer, but these are of no use. Okay. Another important thing, right now this structure is not fully captured. If we have to properly or accurately capture the flow dynamics, in that case, near this curvature, we have to go for very, very fine meshes. So what will be happening with fine meshes when, if this is my curvature and if my meshes are very small, in that case, what will be happening? Whatever the horizontal and vertical lines I will be taking to approximate this curved surface, these horizontal and vertical lines will be actually accurately mimicking our solid boundary. Not exactly, but approximately it will be actually close enough to the curvature of the solid boundary. Okay, so these are some of the restrictions, and this particular restriction you can see we have seen with nothing but a very, very simple grid arrangement. So this simple grid arrangement is nothing but when flow is happening over a half cylinder. So it is not a very complex geometry. Okay. So this is one restriction when we are having some geometries which are not actually mimicking the requirement of parallel to any Cartesian any coordinate system. Okay. Now, in case if we are having say flow through a pipe, okay, obviously for flow through a pipe also we will be finding many of the curved boundaries, and if I go for structured Cartesian grid, once again I'll be having difficulty of treating the curvature of the cylindrical surface. For example, if this is the cylinder, if I have to make structured Cartesian grid, once again I have to like immerse my boundaries inside, and then I have to treat these solid horizontal and vertical lines in order to treat properly the surface of the cylinder. Okay, but in such cases what we can do, if we are finding that we are having some geometry which is actually just mimicking any of our coordinate system. For example, this cylinder over here is nothing but mimicking our cylindrical coordinate system. Okay, so under this condition what I can do, instead of having Cartesian grid for this cylinder, I can have now nothing but grids in the cylindrical coordinate system. Okay, so how we will be having grids in cylindrical coordinate system? For example, this is my circle. I am having grids along angular directions. Okay, one is angular discretization and one I will be having nothing but radial discretization. So I can have grids like this, and along the length I will be having nothing but simple divisions like this. Okay, so this is how, like, what we try to do while we create the mesh. We first try to find out that our like geometry is having similarity with which of the coordinate system, and as per that coordinate system then we try to create the discretization. Because once we have created this structured grid and any specific coordinate system, after that what we will be doing in our governing equations, we have to only change the divergence and the gradient operator, because divergence and gradient operator in Cartesian system will be different than divergence and gradient operator in other, say, cylindrical or spherical coordinate system. So we have to only change the divergence and gradient operator in our governing equations, and in that particular coordinate system, whatever governing equations we are having, these actually we will be integrating. Okay, so this procedure of using the structured grid is very, very simple if we are finding some geometry where we are able to meet actually similarity with any of the coordinate system. However, whenever we are having some mixing of different coordinates, for example, in the half cylinder case, if you see cylinder, this one domain near the cylinder can be easily mimicked using cylindrical meshes in a structured fashion. However, away from the cylinder, we require some Cartesian grid. Okay, so under these conditions, actually, we are having some difficulties, and using any of the structured grid in any specific coordinate system will be actually very, very difficult implementation wise, as well as lead to some inaccuracies also. So that's why we have to go for different types of meshes. Okay, so what we do, we broadly categorize meshes into two types. First we call as nothing but structured curvilinear meshes. Okay, structured curvilinear meshes, and another is we call as nothing but unstructured meshes. Okay, unstructured meshes. So in case of structured curvilinear, we will be having some structure. It need not to be always in the Cartesian coordinate system. It can be in any other coordinate system, but we will be having some structured arrangement of grids. By meaning of structured grid means every time we will be having some two lines, and these two lines, while these will be intersecting, these will be actually intersecting only at single location throughout the entire domain. Okay, so in this structured curvilinear grids, there comes further different types of grids. So the very first type comes is orthogonal grids. Okay, orthogonal grids. And second in this structured curvilinear is actually non-orthogonal. So in case of orthogonal, what we ensure that we are having some structured arrangement, and the angle between these two lines over here is 90 degrees. So if this angle can be 90 even in this type of arrangement also. So if this angle is 90 degree between the two lines, then we call our mesh as nothing but orthogonal grid. And if this angle is other than 90, then we call our mesh as non-orthogonal or skewed grid. Okay. Then apart from this, so this is the broad classification how we can actually, whatever different meshes you will be creating in these categories, you can fit. Apart from this, from practical perspective also, we are having two different classifications. One is called as body fitted mesh. First is called as body fitted mesh, and second is called as block structured mesh. Okay, so body fitted and block structured meshes are some configurations which are employed to meet the meshing of complex geometries in some specific structured arrangement. And obviously these will be coming in the broad category of structured curvilinear, orthogonal or non-orthogonal grids. But the idea is, from practical perspective, we are classifying these two. In case of body fitted mesh, what we try to do, we try to actually create our mesh in such a fashion so that it is giving some specific structure also, and at the same point of time it is actually fitting our body also. Okay, so it has to fit entire complex body, but while fitting the body, it is actually giving some specific structure. And in case of block structured mesh, we will be having a mesh in some specific structured way, but we will be having different blocks of fine and coarse meshes. So near the like boundaries, curved boundaries, complex boundaries, we will be going for very fine meshes. So these blocks near the boundaries are considered as fine blocks, and away from the boundaries, we will be having nothing but little bit coarser blocks. Okay, so let us try to see examples of these in the subsequent slides. So this is orthogonal curvilinear mesh. This comes under the category of body fitted mesh. Okay, so you can see over here, this is our aerofoil, and we have actually created lines in such a fashion so that these lines are actually fitting the body of this aerofoil structure. Okay, and while we have created this mesh, this is done in some structured way. You can see we are having some specific structured arrangement over here while we are creating this mesh. And you can note one important point, that everywhere this angle in between the meshes is actually something around 90 degree. Okay, so when this angle is 90 degree, under this condition we will be calling our mesh as nothing but orthogonal curvilinear mesh. But this comes under the heading of body fitted mesh, because in order to fit the shape of the body, we have selected the orientation of the lines. Okay, so is this point clear?
Yes, sir.
Then I have another body fitted mesh, but this body fitted mesh is actually of non-orthogonal type. So you can see this is nothing but flow over a half cylinder only. So in this half cylinder, we have actually near the cylinder boundary, we have taken the advantage of cylindrical symmetry, and we have created some circumferential curvature we have given to this grid lines. And then away from that, we are having actually some structured arrangement, but obviously while different grids are actually interacting with each other, the angle between the lines is not 90 degrees. So this is some structured arrangement, but over here we are not having angle as 90 degrees. So that's why we are calling this as nothing but non-orthogonal body fitted mesh. Okay. Now we will be taking one example, and with the help of that example, we will establish that whether to follow a structured Cartesian grid for complex geometry, or if in case we follow a body fitted mesh, which one will be giving us the better control and accuracy. Okay, so this is one typical example of a flow over a heat exchanger tube bank. So you can consider this is the tubes of a heat exchanger which are actually arranged in some staggered fashion, and flow is happening in some cross direction to these tubes. Okay, now over here you can see these tubes are making some type of symmetry. Okay, and considering that symmetry, I will be only considering this much portion as the part of the domain, and whatever flow behavior I will be having over here, same will be applicable in other segments if I try to make this symmetry. Okay, so everywhere I am having actually this type of symmetrical arrangement. So I will only study the flow through this particular segment which I have selected over here. Okay, so considering this, this is the first segment I have taken. So this first segment I have considered using structured Cartesian grid. Okay, so here I am having nothing but structured Cartesian grid, and in this structured Cartesian grid, in order to treat these curvatures, we have given some stepped lines. So these are the stepped lines you can see in order to like treat these curvatures over here. And let us consider or even while we have discretized over here, we have given number of grid points 40 in this direction and 15 in this direction. So this is a mesh of 40 by 15 number of meshes. Okay, similarly I have created another mesh structure, but it is a nothing but a body fitted mesh. Okay, so in this body fitted mesh also, what I have created, I have kept number of divisions as 40 into 15 only. So for example, these divisions are 15 in this direction everywhere, and in this direction the number of divisions are from this corner to that corner as 40. Okay, so same number of grid points I have created over here. So it means in terms of computational power, if you see, we have to only have some data structure for storing this 40 by 15 parameters. Okay, now in this situation, let me give you the limitations and advantages of one system over another. So in first system, you can see first point is boundaries are not treated properly. In order to properly treat the boundary, we have to go with very fine mesh. Okay, over here boundaries, curvature of the boundary is treated appropriately. And another important point is, though in both cases we have used 40 by 15 grid structure, but here some of the grids are actually not participating into the actual flow domain. So these are becoming the part of the solid which is actually of no use. So over here I can see that out of this 40 by 15, only 70 to 75% of the grids are actually becoming part of the simulation domain, and remaining grids are nothing but wastage. And in terms of computer memory also, it is actually taking some space which is of no use. Okay, however, over here whatever 40 by 15 a number of grid points we have taken, so all of these are actually included in order to fit the entire domain and participating in estimating the flow dynamics. Okay, so now if we see the predictions, so in predictions also you can see here we are having very coarse mesh, and we are not able to treat the curvature appropriately. So because of the curvature, there will be some change in the flow direction, but that change in the flow direction is not accounted over here. Here it is accounted, but once again it is not very accurate near the these stepped surfaces. Okay, and there is this circulation, but this circulation also appears to be very weak over here. However, in this case, in body fitted mesh, if you see here, these actually details are very fine, and these velocities are captured very carefully in order to account for the effect of the curvature. Okay, here also you can see this is a good representation near the curvature boundaries, and everywhere wherever we are having curvature, actually the treatment of the curvature boundaries is actually nicely done, and predictions are better by using body fitted mesh in comparison to the structured Cartesian mesh. Okay. Then comes another very popular mesh, which is called as block structured mesh. So as I told you that in case of block structured mesh, we will be having nothing but our structured mesh only, structured curvilinear mesh only. But the another advantage we will be having over here, that wherever required, there we will try to go for very fine meshes in some block arrangement. For example, you can see these are very coarse block. Then from coarse block to we are moving some finer blocks. Then from these finer blocks, at some point we have moved to this finer, then next finer, and then the very fine, which is actually required near the solid boundary. Apart from this, some of the blocks I have given here also. So these blocks, fine blocks, are just given to actually properly resolve the shock wave, which will be appearing somewhere over here in this vicinity. Okay, so in order to capture the shock wave dynamics properly, here also very fine meshes are given. Okay, and this is some zoomed view of this block structured arrangement you can see near the solid boundary. So this type of mesh, where we are having some blocks as very large, some blocks as like we are having some grading of blocks, this type of mesh is called as block structured mesh. And in order to create this block structured mesh, we use either quad tree or oct tree arrangement. Quad tree in case of two-dimensional systems. In case of three-dimensional systems, we use oct tree arrangement. So the meaning of oct tree is, for example, if I have one cell, and let me consider this cell is at some level 0. So the meaning of level 0, this is actually coarsest cell in our simulation domain. Okay. Now, if I want to refine this cell, let us consider this is a 2D situation. If I want to refine this cell by one level, so the corresponding level version of level 1 version of this cell will be something like this. That one cell will be divided into 4. So this is level 1 version of this first cell only. If I have to go to level 2, then what I will be doing? After level 1, whatever cells I am having, these also I will be dividing subsequently into next 4. So this type of arrangement is actually called as quad tree arrangement. So for 2 dimensions, you can see when I have shifted from level 0 to level 1, how many cells it has created? 4. And when it has shifted to level 2, how many it has created? 16. Okay. So
16.
yeah, I can call that my number of grid points in some block can be written as 2 power level into dimension of the problem. Okay. For example, over here our problem is 2-dimensional. Okay. So for 2-dimensional problem, D value will be 2. So D value will be 2, and L is like if I want to go to level 2, so I will be writing 2 into 2. So it will be becoming nothing but equal to 16. Okay. So this is how I can define the number of grid points. The meaning of level 0 is we are having the single block. Level 1, we are having this one 4 divisions of level 0. Then level 2, we are having further 4 divisions of each cell of level 1. Okay. Similarly, in case of 3D, if we have to create, Can you tell me what will be the number of divisions in 3D? Say this is my level 0 cell. In 3D, when I will be doing divisions, it will be creating how many cells? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and behind I'll be having 7 and 1 behind 8. Okay. So in 3D, when we are changing the level, actually it is creating 8 cells. So for 3D, if you apply this formula, so for level 1, n grid will be equal to nothing but 2 power level is 1 into 3. So it is showing how many grid points? 8 grid points. Okay. Now this type of block structured mesh and this type of formulation is many times used for adaptive mesh refinement also. Okay, so this is one very popular strategy for having fine meshes only near the structures wherever it is required, and away from that we want to have coarse mesh. Okay, so this type of strategy is called as adaptive mesh refinement. Let me show you one application of adaptive mesh refinement. For example, yesterday we have seen this dam break problem. So in case of dam break problem, we found that our interface was very, very thick. So it means mesh was very coarse. Okay. However, if we see from, so it means if we have to now properly capture the interface, so everywhere I have to refine the mesh. So if I'll be refining everywhere mesh, my computational resources required will be actually huge. Okay, so that's why what I can do, I can consider, say at time t equal to 0, my mesh is my interface is like this. So what I can do, only near this interface I can take fine meshes, and away from that I can go for coarse meshes, like I have done in case of this block structured arrangement. Okay, but what will be happening, this problem over here is actually transient. Means with time this interface will be evolving. So after some time I'll be finding that this interface will be moving something like this. So if I don't move these blocks, then obviously there is no meaning of keeping these fixed fine blocks at some specific location. Okay, so what I want, that as the interface is traveling, along with interface my fine blocks should also travel. So this type of mesh which facilitates this arrangement is called as adaptive mesh refinement. So it basically tracks the gradient of the volume fraction field, and depending upon gradient of the volume fraction field, where gradient is existing, there it will be creating fine blocks, and away from that it will be creating actually coarse blocks. Okay, and it is not always the case that gradient of volume fraction field only will be used for specifying fine meshes. Apart from gradient of volume fraction, if we want that, say where velocity is uniform, there let us keep mesh as coarse, and where we are having strong gradients of velocity, there obviously we have to go for the fine meshes. So we can use gradient of any other parameter also in order to specify fine meshes in some specific domain. And obviously when that gradient value will be changing, so the big change of the gradient values, the mesh structure will also change. It will try to shift to the locations where gradients are existing, or where the criteria based on which we have actually given refinement, that criteria is met. So one important thing you might have observed from this point, that whenever we are having this coarsest cell, when we are moving from this coarsest cell to next fine, we are not immediately refining too much cells. We are refining first in one level higher, then further one level higher, and like that. So this is one very, very important point, because if we have to treat the fluxes transfer from one cell to another cell. So if we will be like creating large gradient between the two, then smoothness of the mesh will be decreasing. So that will be resulting in some errors and sudden gradients into our solution, some numerical errors into our solution. So that's why when we refine the mesh, whether with dynamic mesh or whether with fixed mesh, we always consider that when we will be shifting from coarser mesh to finer mesh, the level between the neighboring cells will be only differed by one. Okay, more than one jump we will not be taking. This point is clear?
Yes, sir. So
Is yeah.
in case of the dam break problem, we are taking the adaptiveness refinement in case of a water body which is breaking away. But in case of a solid body moving in a water body, there also we have to use adaptive mesh refinement.
Yes, we can use if say water body which is floating. Obviously, near the water body, you will be finding near the solid boundary, there will be strong gradients of the velocity. Okay. So there gradient of velocity can be treated as criteria to refine the mesh near the body which we are having. Okay.
Okay, okay.
Okay, then this is all about the different types of meshes we are having. Now let us move to popular meshes which are used for complex geometries, and these meshes are called as nothing but unstructured meshes, unstructured grids or unstructured mesh. Okay, so this is the typical representation of a triangular unstructured grid for 3-element airfoil problem. So we are having this first element of airfoil, second element and third element over here, and we are having this unstructured mesh, and you can see in this unstructured everywhere we are having arrangements as nothing but triangles. So we have created all elements as triangles. So mostly for 2-dimensional problems we consider triangles and quadrilaterals as the elements, and for 3-dimensional problems we consider tetrahedral and hexahedral as the elements. Apart from this, there are many other things. For example, pyramids, prisms can also be taken, but broadly in order to maintain the good mesh quality, we try to take hexahedra or tetrahedra. Okay, now you can see in our unstructured meshes it is very easy to refine the localized zone, and when we are refining the localized zone it will not be transmitting to a different section, and in different section we can have actually coarse arrangement. Okay, so this is a typical representation of triangular unstructured grid. Then in this grid, if you see, all the elements are of triangular nature only. So it is not the case always that we have to take same type of grid elements, same type of control volume elements only. We can have mixed type of arrangement also. So for example, for this cylindrical curvature boundaries, we are having these near boundary elements as quadrilaterals, and in the core region we are having nothing but triangles. So this is a mixed element grid arrangement. While we are creating the grid, we have to take care of 3 important parameters. The first parameter is called as skewness. Second parameter is called as smoothness of grid, and third parameter is called as aspect ratio of the grid. Okay, skewness is something which is associated with orthogonality of the grid also. Okay, so skewness is actually associated with orthogonality of grid also. So what we try to do, let me first define about skewness. So for example, if we consider a triangle element, the ideal triangular element will be nothing but a equilateral triangle where all elements are of same size and we are having angles as nothing but 60 degree. Okay, so if this angle is 60 degrees, so that will be like the ideal triangular configuration. Now if my configuration is actually deviating from the ideal configuration, say I am getting some triangular element, something like this, so that type of element is nothing but called as skewed element. Okay, so there are like different formulations for calculating the skewness with different types of grids, but just to summarize, for the triangular grid I can define skewness as skewness is equal to maximum of theta max minus theta e divided by 180 minus theta e, either this thing or theta e minus theta minimum divided by theta e. So theta e is actually our 60 degree, which is the equivalent for angle for ideal triangular element, and 180 is the sum of all angles of triangle, and theta max is actually maximum angle in some skewed cell, and theta minimum is actually minimum angle in some skewed cell. So depending upon this formulation, like whatever value we will be getting, that is called as skewness. Generally, the magnitude of skewness we will be finding will be from 0 to 1. Okay, so for highly skewed cells, its magnitude will be approaching to 1, and for cells which are not having any skewness, its magnitude value will be 0. So that's why when we create mesh, we always try to check the skewness of the grid, and for majority of the grid elements, skewness has to be kept less than equal to 0.8. Okay, so if going beyond 0.8, then we can go maximum up to 0.9 to 0.95. But obviously, under these scenarios, we have to locate the locations of these highly skewed cells, and we have to consider that these highly skewed cells are not huge in number, and at the same point of time, wherever these cells are actually lying, these grids are lying, there we are not having any strong changes, strong gradients in the flow field, which may lead to some numerical error. Because if our skewness of the message is not properly taken care of, then we will be getting significant errors in. Errors come into solution that we will just see when we will be talking about mathematical formulations of unstructured grids. Okay, this is first parameter. Second parameter is smoothness. So the meaning of smoothness, I have just now explained also earlier, that when we are moving from one grid structure to another, one block to another block, then we will not be actually changing suddenly the size. So normally in adjacent cells, in adjacent grids, size should not vary more than 20%. Okay, so this is some criteria that when we are giving some coarse to fine or fine to coarse, then in the adjacent cells or neighboring cells, whatever size is actually changing. So on an average basis, that should not exceed more than 20%. Okay, and aspect ratio is one important criteria. So for example, these are two dimensions. One is L and this is H of a cell. So the ratio of L by H is something which is called as aspect ratio. So we have to also limit aspect ratio. We may go up to aspect ratio. Always we try to maintain aspect ratio within 5, but for some configuration, say where near the wall, for example, let me give you some idea over here. Yeah, here, wherever near the wall, actually we were requiring very fine mesh, and that fine mesh creation, this is also important point. When we create some fine mesh in structured meshes, in away region also, that refinement actually creates issue, because in the away region there is not requirement of this line, but in order to follow the structure I have to give this line. So that's why this particular line is actually making the aspect ratio as very large. But still, as these are very far away from the solid boundaries where mainly gradients are existing, so we can create some high aspect ratio. But still, one important point we have to take care, that when we are having high gradients, then we have to keep our aspect ratio within the range of 2 to 3, and at max we can go up to 5. Okay, so all these points are clear?
Yes, sir.
Okay, now let us go to the mathematical formulation of unstructured grids, how we go for discretization using the unstructured grids. So first is how we actually locate our positions of the node point. That is what I have explained over here. So I am considering some control volume in two-dimensional unstructured grid. So this first arrangement is corresponding to cell-centered arrangement. Okay, so this is called as cell-centered arrangement, and next one is called as vertex-centered arrangement. So this second one is actually vertex-centered arrangement. So in first case, what we are doing, for each unstructured cell, whatever the centroid of the cell we are having, so whatever the centroid of the cell we are having, that centroid we are considering as nothing but our node point. In case of vertex centered arrangement, what we do, we consider the corner point of the element which is joined by different elements, that as some this as our node point. And what we will be doing now, different centroids of the cells, neighboring cells, we will be joining in order to create some periphery around this cell. So while we will be joining these centroids, actually these centroid points, in order to create this periphery, so that will be actually becoming nothing but part of the control volume for this node arrangement. So one is cell centered arrangement where we are placing the nodes at the centroid, and another is vertex centered, whereas at the whatever like physical discretization we have done, at the corner points, at the vertices of this physical discretization, we are placing nodes and we are creating some hypothetical computational control volume by locating these boundaries. Okay. However, out of these two, obviously each one is having their advantages and limitations, but out of these two, the most popular one is cell-centered arrangement, which is used in mostly all commercial and the open source CFD packages. Okay. So let us now try to see the discretization. So let me consider that how I will be doing. So we know that so I am showing this FVM discretization first with the help of a scalar transport equation. Okay. So we know that when we are having some scalar transport equation, the very first step, what we have to do, we have to integrate our governing equation over the control volume. So that is what I have done. I have integrated this equation over the entire control volume. Now, while we will be integrating using the Gauss divergence theorem, we know that if we are having some A vector and we are calculating divergence of A vector into dV, that becomes nothing but n dot A into surface area, area integral. So by applying this Gauss divergence theorem, my term number 2 and 3 will be taking the form n dot rho phi u into dA and n dot gamma gradient phi into dA, where this n is nothing but outward normal vector from a control surface. Outward normal vector to a control surface. Okay. Now, obviously, when we are having some unstructured mesh, we will be finding that even in structured also, we are not having only a single control surface, we are having multiple control surfaces involved. For example, if my, say, cell is something like this, say this is my control volume and this is my node point. So if I'm considering this node, so for this node, I'll be having this one as my one control surface, then this one is second surface, this is third, fourth, and 5 surface I am having over here. Okay. So that's why while I'm writing this, I have considered that this integration I have to do for summation of all surfaces, whereas this delta AI I am referring to the area of each surface. Okay, so I over here is indicating or pointing to these different surfaces 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and area of ith surface is actually represented with I. Delta A I over here, and Ni dot is also, N is actually outward unit normal vector of that particular ith surface. Okay. Similarly, I have written it for my diffusion term. Okay. Now, if I consider the assumption of steady flow, so for steady flow, what will be happening? For steady flow situation, my this first term will be becoming 0. Okay, so I have removed this term and I am writing, I am only using now other 3 remaining terms in my governing equation. Okay, till this point it is clear whatever I have explained. Is it okay or shall I repeat?
Okay.
Okay, and then this is a typical arrangement of two-dimensional control volumes, which I have shown over here. So, for example, this is a triangular cell. This is delta A area of the face, ith face, and Ni is unit normal vector of that face. Similarly, for other faces, we will be having like different arrangements. And if I am considering this as equilateral triangle, so delta A will be same for square delta A, and for this hexagon with the same size of the elements, area will be same. Okay, so this is the formulation, like all faces areas. This is how I can actually specify. I explained you earlier also. Now let us consider. So with this point, one thing is clear. First is we have to find out area of each face. Okay, so area of each face of control volume is something which we have to find out. Another is unit normal vector to each face. Okay, unit normal vector to each face. This also we have to find out. Here also these two are same. Apart from this, I have to find out value for this rho phi u, this, and another important point is I have to find out this gradient of phi. Okay, so grade of phi is also one important thing which we have to find out. So for the first time, let us consider that gradient of phi and rho phi u will be something which we will be discussing when we will be talking about discretization of diffusion term and discretization of convection term. Okay, but before that, from the geometry of the element only, there are two parameters which we can determine. So the first parameter is delta A, area of each face of the control volume, and second parameter is unit normal vector to each face. So these let us try to find from the geometry. So what I have done, I have taken over here two triangular cells. So this is the first cell over here, and this is the second cell, and these cells are actually neighboring each other. I'm considering that this is my XY coordinate system, and this cell is having node point P, and the neighboring cell is, this is the node point of neighboring cell, which is actually point number A. Corresponding to this global coordinate system, XY coordinate system, let us consider the coordinates of this point are X, A, Y, A, and coordinates of point P are X, P, and Y, P. Okay. Then I have some common face in between these two cells, and this common face is represented by small a and small b. Okay, and the vertices of this point A and B are, say, X, A, Y, A, and X, B, Y, B. Okay, now what I have considered over here that this line, I have some line which is joining the node points P and A. So let us consider the unit normal vector along the line which is joining point P and A is nothing but E zeta. Okay, so E zeta is unit normal vector in the direction which is joining points P and A. And let us consider delta zeta is the distance between these two points. Okay. Similarly, I am considering that between the vertex which are actually common over here with this face, for this vertex, the space between points A and B is delta eta, and the unit vector along this face we are calling as nothing but E eta. Okay. Another important point, from this face, whatever the outward normal unit vector we are having, that I am writing as n vector. Okay, so that is I am writing as n. Now, one important point let me highlight. So this n is unit normal vector which is normal to the face, and this particular E eta is unit normal vector which is parallel to the face. So that's why between these two vectors we will be having nothing but our 90-degree angle. Okay. Now what I have done, this particular edge only I have drawn over here, and for this edge, this distance we have taken as delta eta. And when we are talking about two-dimensional mesh, in case of two-dimensional arrangement, In the third direction, we will not be having any cell width. So when we are having unit cell width, under that condition, we can say that area of this face will be nothing but equal to delta eta. So is this point clear? How area is becoming equal to delta eta?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Okay, then let us consider that this distance along the, which is parallel to the global y coordinate, that is actually delta y, and distance parallel to global x coordinate, we are calling it as nothing but delta x. And this is our ith face which is under consideration, and area of this ith face I am writing as delta ai. Okay, now for this face, simply if you just apply the Pythagoras theorem, you can say that delta ai will be nothing but equal to delta x square plus delta y square, where delta x is nothing but xb minus xa, and delta y will be yb minus ya. Okay, so this is coming from our simple geometric consideration. Similarly, if you try to see, you will be able to find out the unit normal vector as delta y by delta ai minus delta x by delta ai. Let me a little bit elaborate how we can get this unit normal vector. So you can consider this is our normal vector n over here, and say this is n, and let us consider this angle over here is theta. If this angle over here is theta, so if I draw some horizontal line which is nothing but representing unit vector I, which is parallel to x-axis, and one more unit vector, say I am writing one more unit vector j, which is parallel to y-axis. So if this angle is theta, this particular angle will also be theta. Is this point clear? If this angle is theta, can I write this angle as theta?
Yes, sir.
As this is 90 degrees, so this particular angle over here will be becoming nothing but 90 minus theta. Okay. So what I can do, I can write that n vector will be equal to I cap into cos 90 minus theta plus j cap into, what will be the angle for j cap? If this is 90 minus theta, this will try to become theta. Okay, so plus j into cos theta. Now if you calculate cos theta over here, cos theta will be becoming nothing but delta x by delta ai. So cos theta I have written delta x by delta ai j cap, and over here if you try to consider this sine theta, this cos 90 minus theta will become sine theta, and it will become delta y by delta ai. So this is how actually we can calculate the normal vector which is moving in outward direction. Okay, now after this, let us talk about discretization of the diffusion term, because in the diffusion term we were requiring n and we were requiring delta ai. So delta ai and n we have estimated. Now let us try to estimate that how to find out this gradient of phi. So once again, I am having this arrangement something like this. This is my node P, this is A, and this is zeta direction. Theta is the angle between zeta and n, and E eta is vector which is parallel to the face. Okay, so all the assumptions are similar as I have taken previously. Now, one important thing you can see over here from this first figure, I can say that if this is my node point P, this is my node point A, and along this direction, the distance is nothing but delta zeta. If I have to apply central difference scheme between these 2 points, what will be my gradient of phi? If I apply central difference scheme,
Phi a minus phi p divided by delta g.
Phi a minus phi b
divided
Divided by delta
yes.
g.
delta zeta. Okay. So let us try to consider that we have used central difference scheme between these two node points. So if I use central difference scheme, I can write that delta ai ni into gamma gradient phi dA is nothing but nearly equal to ni dot into gamma gradient of phi into delta ai, okay, for this case. And this ni dot gradient of phi I am approximating using central difference scheme as phi a minus phi p divided by delta zeta into delta ai. Okay, so this type of formulation will be accurate only if n and e zeta are parallel. This point is clear. What I am trying to say over here, if this normal vector and e zeta vector, this is one is normal vector n and this another e zeta vector, if it is parallel to the normal, then only this formulation will be mathematically accurate. Otherwise it will give us some error, because there will be, in case of skewed cell or unstructured cell, if cells are orthogonal, then obviously this configuration will be applicable. But in case of non-orthogonal or skewed cells, there will be some additional term which will be coming into picture. Why? Let me just explain you. When we are estimating this term, what we are trying to find out? We are trying to find out gamma into gradient of phi, but this gamma into gradient of phi we are trying to find out in the direction of normal vector. Whereas while we have estimated this phi a minus phi p by delta zeta, it is nothing but in the direction of e zeta vector. This point is clear or not?
Yes, sir.
Can you repeat?
Okay, let me repeat it again. What I have mentioned you, this term gamma into grade of phi. So this term gamma into grade of phi actually is multiplied with unit normal vector. Once it is multiplied with unit normal vector, the meaning of this is we want to calculate this gradient along the direction of the n vector. Okay. However, when I have approximated it from central difference scheme, I have simply written phi a minus phi p by del zeta, which represents its gradient along this e zeta direction. As e zeta and n cap are different, so obviously some component of this e zeta has to be considered along the normal direction. So it means apart from this term, there will be one more term into our gradient calculation actually, which will be accounting for estimation of gradient along the normal direction, outward normal direction. Okay, so the term which we have calculated over here, this particular term is something which is called as direct gradient. Okay, and the term which we have to add in order to the additional term which we have to include in order to make flow possible, in order to correct this gradient, that particular term is called as cross diffusion. Okay, and this cross diffusion is one important term. We will try to see in subsequent slides the mathematical formulation of this cross diffusion. However, this cross diffusion is actually very important parameter which is actually which helps us in correcting the value of diffusion term, and moreover it is included as source term into our solution. Okay, so how to do this, that let us try to see in the next lecture. But at the moment you have to consider that whatever gradient we are approximating from central difference scheme, that is along direction e zeta, and required gradient is along normal direction. So because of this we will be having some error. So in order to avoid that error, along with the direct gradient we have to include some cross diffusion term. Okay, so with this discussion I will stop at this point, and if you are having any questions that you may discuss now.